How you feeling? You got John Rakes here, all about the NES bootlegs. I don't know why I like them as much as I do. I think they're just fun. I like to see, because I'm a huge NES homebrew fan. These are homebrews. At the end of the day, it's just that they were released and unlicensed, and they're out there in the public in some form of capacity. Sometimes they're on these multi-carts, like Famicom multi-carts. Sometimes they're just on cartridges that came out in, Russia, maybe came out in, Korea, China, something like that. But they're out there, and people make these games, and of course they have the tie-in. They get the bootleg because they make licensed games, but they're not licensed on a console that's not approved. And it just goes down this rabbit hole to make it an awesome bootleg. Sometimes awesome. Actually, sometimes some of these bootlegs are actually kind of playable, but some of them are just like, really? They did that? Seriously? And sometimes these bootlegs are basically just ROM hacks. I mean, I know a thing or two about ROM hacks. Like this one, this Chippendales 3. Well, it's like, oh, I love Chippendales Rescue Rangers 1 and 2, but they made a third one? Well, no, it's Heavy Barrel, but they put chipmunks in there. And this pops up every once in a while on those bootleg multi-carts. I think it's hilarious. Here's a couple of them that you can check out. Kicking off with a pretty popular one, you may already know about this one. This is Somari. Basically, they took Sonic the Hedgehog and put it on the NES. So that's already a bootleg in and of itself, but then they took it a step further and hacked it. So you play as Mario in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. And you know what's funny? It actually doesn't play terrible. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad. It reminds me a little bit like if Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis was an arcade game, this would have been the Tengen version that we would have got for the NES. And I would have been like, yeah, that sounds about right. That's pretty close to it. Same as Sonic though. I mean, you can spin up into a ball, you can grab your rings, you can do that little loop-de-loo, defeat the enemies, save the animals. It's Sonic, but they just changed the graphics from Sonic to Mario. However, the Sonic game on the NES is still a bootleg, so got that to consider. Well, sure, you've heard of Somari, but have you ever heard of Crash Bandicoot for the NES? That's right. Yeah, they made somebody made a Crash Bandicoot game for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and oh man, I mean, at first glance you're like, this isn't Crash. This is like a platformer. You can jump, you can spin, you're collecting apples. But I'll be honest with you, the graphic for Crash doesn't look that bad. I mean, it's okay, right? A little cartoony, a little cutesy anyway. It's, the sluggishly slow, the slow-moving Crash Bandicoot. That's one of the things about Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation, right? Because it's, quick action, fast-paced, fun, cute, had the, the cool mascot and everything with Crash and everything. And this game, oh boy. So this is a Crash Bandicoot for the NES. Side-scrolling platformer, slow rolling on this one. And, man, it's like you pick up the apples, they're not giving you points, at least you don't see anything in the first place. You just kind of move along, man. Somebody made this. Hey, how about some fighting games in the name of Street Fighter II? This is the World Warrior. So in this version, you can only play as 4 characters. You have Zangief, you have Ryu, you have Chun-Li, and you have Guile. And again, for being a bootleg, it doesn't play terrible. I mean, it's not the greatest looking, the frame rate, the animation, not up to par with Street Fighter II, which is still an S-tier game forever. However, for the NES, I mean, it's something. It's better than nothing, I guess. Kind of bigger sprites than usual. You still have some of your special moves, as usual. It's a decent effort for Street Fighter II for the NES. It's actually a little bit impressive, I think. But yeah, Street Fighter II is fine and all, but what about Mortal Kombat? Oh boy. Well, yeah, there are actually several Mortal Kombat games that were bootlegs. I'll show you a couple of them anyway. And again, the graphics are actually kind of decent for an NES, game in the first place. Some of your special moves available. I mean, that was Mortal Kombat 2, but we have Mortal Kombat 3. Now, it looks like there's a ton of characters, but it's just the same ones looping over and over and over again. And still, doesn't look terrible, doesn't look bad. Plays pretty terrible, plays pretty bad, but at least it's Mortal Kombat. I may do a Mortal Kombat video in and of itself, because there's so many of them that are out there that are NES bootlegs, but here's just a few of them to begin with. Besides, I mean, these are the 16-bit fighting games. You had Street Fighter, you had Mortal Kombat, but what about something like Tekken? Well, guess what? Tekken 2 exists for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And it plays like a side-scrolling fighting game. That's, you know, best effort, okay pixels, okay graphics, you know, but it's out there, it exists, it's somewhere. I mean, I'll be honest with you, cool little victory scene here, cool little victory screen. I can't go wrong with that. Now, these bootleg games for the NES are fine and dandy, but what if you lived in a place where you didn't really know the difference between a bootleg game and a licensed game? What you had was what you had. Well, that was the case in Russia, so to talk a little bit more about that, here is Victor, the Russian video game comrade.
Hello John, hello YouTube, my name is Victor and I am the host of Russian Video Game Comrade YouTube show. John asked me to tell about my favorite bootleg today, and as I'm Russian, it's quite hard to choose just one. As you may know, till mid-2000s, most of video games in Russia were bootleg. NES games, Mega Drive games, PC games and PlayStation games. Tons of cheap bootlegs, sometimes quite bizarre ones. For example, did you know you could play Batman and Flash crossover game on NES? No? You couldn't. In Russia, we could. Yes, years later, we realized it was Monsters in My Pocket hack. But in 90s in Russia nobody knew Monsters in My Pocket game, but everyone liked Batman and Flash. But Dandy is the most obvious thing, so let me step aside of it today and rock your world a little with PlayStation. PlayStation 1 was the second national console in Russia after Dandy, and we had not only lots of original games both on Japanese, English and translated to Russian, mostly poorly translated, but even original Russian ones. This includes Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, erotic dating games, software to learn school chemistry course, and even a software/game to help you get your driver's license. Yes, in Russia you could buy a CD for PlayStation 1 designed to help Russian citizens to get their driver's license. Was it any good? Not a bit. This is the CD. Interesting thing that it's designed both to use with PS1 and Windows PC. I will not mention PC part today, let's just look at PS1 side. This is a compilation of 3 different softwares. First of all, this CD has real questions used in theoretical Russian driver's license exam in past years. You can run it and try to determine if you know enough to pass the exam. You just answer questions and get a yes or no in the conclusion. Second part here is scanned maps of Russian capital Moscow and its suburbs. Yes, just like that. You have lots of JPEGs on a PS1 CD you can browse through. And yes, it's a CD from 2002, time we hadn't had smartphones and navigators, but I still don't have a clue in what case it could be useful. The only way I can imagine, owner of this soft had his ride pimped by Exhibit and had a TV and modded PS1 in his car, so he could use it instead of ordinary maps you could buy simply anywhere. But it's still not the best part of this CD. We still have the third option here, and it's called Virtua Driver. What do you expect when you hear such title? I don't know if you have such software in Europe or US, but in Russia we had a lot of get ready for getting your driver's license software. And Russian people can expect some poorly made simulators where you have to drive safe, stop at red traffic light signals and etc. But here we have one track from Test Drive 5. Representing Moscow. And that's it. Figure out how it can help you getting driver's license yourself. Thank you for the opportunity to tell a little about interesting Russian bootlegs in your show, John.
Could you imagine going to the DMV in the United States and have them say, okay, it's time for your driving test? And you're just like, nah, I already played Grand Theft Auto, I don't need to take the driving test, I'm good, I know how to drive. They would kick you out. If you want to see some more crazy games from Russia, make sure you check out the Russian Video Game Comrades channel. And speaking of driving, what about this bootleg? What? Seriously? Whoa, maybe? Nope. Not at all. This is Mario Kart, but as you can see, not at all. Yeah, I mean, it's literally just a kind of standard, typical F1 style racing game. There is an F1 Famicom game that I thought this could have been a hack of, but it's not quite the same. So maybe they at least use the same engine or the same something, I don't know. But it's just, you have your low and high gear. It's that style of racing game. And you just have to race to the end of the track. There's no banana peels, there's no red shells or blue shells or anything like that. It's just a standard racing game. You play as Mario, you play as Luigi. I think the low and high gear doesn't really even matter so much. Like, you still have the same acceleration until you get to a certain part, and then you have to turn from low to high. I think you could just keep it on high the whole time and wouldn't lose anything. Oh, how about some Mario Kart for the NES? Well, you might say no thank you, but it's out there. You know, there was a short time after the Super Nintendo was released that some of the great Super Nintendo games were also on the NES for people who didn't have a Super Nintendo yet. And somebody made this. This is Contra III for the Super Nintendo, but playable on the NES. When I say playable, I mean, it's actually kind of decent. I mean, it's playable by every stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not the Super Nintendo version of Contra III, which is super awesome. However, this one, it kind of gets the job done. If you're a fan of Contra, you might want to find this one if you can find it. It's out there, it exists. But yeah, Contra III, available on your NES. It's the Super Nintendo version. It doesn't have like the dual guns, but it does have the bombs. You know, it does have the power-ups, and you know, it's a best effort for a Contra game that was made for the Super Nintendo, and then they put that back onto the NES. Pretty neat. Every once in a while, you might see something that looks like this. And you're like, what's going on? This one, as it turns out, is Golden Axe 3. That's right, Golden Axe 3 on your Nintendo Entertainment System, because why not? Doesn't play very well, not too exciting, but then again, neither is Golden Axe 3. So there you go. But it's out there. It exists. It's a thing. It's a real thing, as you can see here. You have your slash, you have your jump, you have your magic. You even have those little goblin guys that have more magic for you. Yeah, it's Golden Axe. Golden Axe 3, sure. But what if someone put Metal Slug on an NES? Well, it's there, but man, it misses the mark. It's so slow, man. You go through, you shoot your enemies, you can save the prisoners and all that. It's just the slow, moving, super slow moving, my goodness. If you could overclock this game and have it play at a pretty decent speed, it actually might be kind of fun. It actually might be kind of cool. You can't. It won't. So it isn't. However, Metal Slug on the NES. Man, I had my hopes up and everything, but I mean, it's not terrible. It's just, you know, whatever. The Super Shinobi, though, if you're familiar with this game that looks like this and plays like this, it's actually pretty good. This one's actually kind of decent. The jumping is weird. I'll give it that. The jumping is kind of weird. The jumping is slow. The jumping is floating. But the rest of the game actually plays pretty okay. You just attack your guys, fight them off. You have these other guys that, you know, screen stops and almost like mini bosses in a way. You just have to keep slashing at them or attacking them and stuff like that until you, once they're gone, you can move on to the rest of the stage. Items along the way, sure. You even have your little power-up items too, like you have kind of an invincibility, like a stage bomb. You got the fire dragons that can, well, peek up anyway a little bit, but still gets the job done. The Super Shinobi on your NES, wow. And this one's interesting. This one's the dragon. It's the Bruce Lee story. And this one's interesting because it has the option of being in Arabic. Okay, I'm totally cool with that. But then you look at the characters and you look at the graphics. Now, you can't tell me that that's not Scorpion that I'm fighting off here. It plays like an interesting fighting game. You can just, you know, attack and punch, and, you know, your A button is jump. So then everything else is the attack button, and depending on which direction you move on the controller, you might pull off a different move. When in doubt, I'm telling you, just spam them in the corner if you can. Spam them with the leg sweep. Once you get past the first stage, then it kind of turns into a little side-scrolling action. You can move on from there and fight off some enemies. Do some side-scrolling part of the game here. And these boxes are interesting because sometimes they explode, nothing you can do about it, and sometimes they're health. So, you gotta choose wisely on these. Interesting, interesting. A big thank you to Victor, the Russian video game comrade. In fact, if you want to see more about the Dindy, you can check out this video because he invited me on his channel. So we got more videos on that. You can check that out and learn more about what it's like to live in a world where the games were games back then, you know? Thanks so much for checking this out. I'm actually going to play some more Crash Bandicoot right now, and we'll see you very soon.